Thank you for joining us. I am here, my name's Chris Drumgoole, and I am with DXC, and I look after our infrastructure business, and thank you for spending a few minutes with us today. We are here to talk about United Airlines and their amazing journey as they transform their business to focus on the digital customer. So I am joined by Grant and Claire, who are going to have a chat with you today about that exact subject. So I think only next 2 weeks. Yep. United and DXC have been partnered for decades, we'll say, working together, and everybody in the room knows who United is, so I'm going to save you the message of seeing on the slide because many of you probably flew them to get here today safely and securely and in great service. And if you have flown them, as we were just chatting before we came up, you've experienced the amazing digital transformation that they have done to really focus on you as the passenger and the customer, and that we've been very proud to be part of. So we're going to start today by talking about that a little bit. Then we're going to move in to just a little bit of a Q&A discussion, and then open up to questions for all of you. So kind of save your questions as we go. And with that, I'm going to ask Grant to come up and talk a little bit about the transformation.
Thanks so much, Chris. My name is Grant Milstead. I lead up customer, commercial, and corporate technology at United. And as Chris mentioned, we've been on a little bit of a journey in terms of transforming our digital experience, and as a result, transforming our customer experience. And before Claire and Chris and myself spend a few minutes kind of doing a panel discussion, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why that's a differentiator for our customers. But before I dive in deep, let's start with a little video. Most literal title ever, Customer Technology Hype Video. That could be my walk-up song to any presentation. But listen, we're at AWS reInvent, and so I think I could have spent the whole discussion today talking about this slide, which is the technology transformation. We've gone from 3 on-prem data centers to global distributed microservices that are powering massive scale. We're driving incredible digital adoption in our mobile app and our .com. We're helping customers take control of their travel with self-service in places that they couldn't even service on digital before. And probably the one that I'm most proud of, we're releasing to the App Store twice as fast as our most nearest competitor. And so the speed and also the scale at which we do this is pretty differentiating. And it's been something we've really transformed just since the pandemic. But this isn't actually at all what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is customers. And if you take away just one point from today's conversation, I'm going to make the broad assumption this is a room of technologists. But if you're not spending a majority of your time thinking about customers, and I'm talking 80%, and a minority of your time thinking about technology, you're probably getting it wrong. And at United, we were kind of getting it wrong too. We were focused on digital products. So we had teams that focused on the shopping cart. We had teams that focused on the boarding pass. We had teams that focused on the seat map. But you know what's kind of weird about that? That's not how customers experience United. They experience United in a full customer flow. It's from inspiration all the way to purchasing a ticket. It's from counting down to your trip to arriving at your destination and everything in between. And so one of the first things we did in that journey of transformation is we changed the way that we thought about products, and we changed the way that we thought about technology into customer journeys, or what we internally call missions. And those missions also have something unique, which is not every customer is created equal, and not every situation that those customers encounter is the same. And so you see some personas up here that we go deep on. The first one, the frustrated traveler, that a snowstorm just rolled in and disrupted your plans for that day. Maybe the business traveler, that might spend more time on my airline than they're going to spend with some family members in that given month or that given year, and they're savvy. The customer that has some special needs, has some accessibility needs, and the way they experience travel is different than others. My favorite, the single, one customer on a reservation that's stuck in the middle seat. And then lastly, this one's near and dear to my heart. I've got a 4-year-old and a 4-month-old. And holy cow, traveling with a family is a little different than traveling as a business customer. And so I wanted to walk through a little bit of the innovation that Chris described that really is differentiating the customer experience. But I'm going to do it in the context of these personas to give you a sense of how do we think about that innovation at United. So I mentioned a frustrated traveler. And when we talk about customers, what do? We went out and asked them, hey, when you're frustrated, what do you need? And what customers told us is information equals control. You're in a frustrating situation. All you want to know is what's going to happen next so you can take control of the situation. So we developed something called Every Flight Has a Story. And what this is it's radical transparency of delivering exactly what we know to our customers and constantly giving them updates. And this wasn't new this year. But what was new this year was the advent of what we're hearing about in every event here, which is generative AI. And with large language models and generative AI, we realized, man, we're writing an incredible message. And in some cases, we were even having humans do it for us to produce that. And so now, the majority of what humans used to generate, we're now generating through generative AI. And we went from 5 systems that were supporting this information to now Gen AI is consuming 70 systems to craft a really transparent message that's more timely, and customers actually give us better NPS scores than what we used to generate with a human. Now let's talk about the business traveler. Fun thing about the business traveler is they know everything I'm going to send them before I send it to them. They're savvy. And so what we thought about for this customer is now the world's different at United. There's no change fees. And so you can change your travel whenever you want. You can stand by for an earlier flight. You can go the next day. What does the business customer need? They need inside information. And so inside information for them is en route weather. What's going to happen on the way to my destination that might change my arrival time? It's the flight plan. Are we taking a northern route or the southern route? Is it going to go through weather? Is it going to be impacted by air traffic control? And so this savvy information, it's not for everybody. But for this customer, they're able to make more informed decisions and also empathize with United and what's happening, more so than anyone else. Now, accessibility. At United, we have a motto. It's connecting people, uniting the world. Now, we don't say connecting some people. We don't say connecting most people. We say connecting people, all people. And so we think travel should be accessible to all. And we looked at a really specific segment of our customers, which is customers that bring their own personal wheelchair. And we started talking to them about their needs, and we found a really interesting use case. These customers have a wheelchair that is sometimes complex, it's sometimes heavy, and sometimes it doesn't fit in the aircraft door. And so they're searching for a flight with a specific aircraft type. Not easy to do. And so we built a filter that allows them to give us the dimensions of their wheelchair, and we filter the flights for them. Now, the fun thing about accessibility is it usually benefits everybody. And with this one, what we found out was we started talking to employees. And employees said, hang on, somebody with a personal wheelchair is giving you that information up front. Can you give it to us at the airport? Because we can have the right personnel there to handle it. We can know the instructions on how to take care and facilitate putting it in the cargo hold. And we can create a better experience for those customers. And so now we're carrying that information through to the airport to be able to better support customers that have this specific need. All right, we're here, we're to the middle seat. So middle seat isn't always bad, by the way. Sit next to your loved one, your family. But if you're traveling by yourself, it's probably not where you want to be. And so we went out and asked our customers, other than getting out of the middle seat, what do you need? And they had a pretty simple request. They said, I just don't want to be checking the seat map over and over and over again. Can you look out for me? And so we came up with a process that internally we call the seat wait list, which is no matter if you're in the middle seat or maybe you're in an aisle, but you're more of a window person, you can tell us what seat you actually would like, what characteristic of that seat, and as soon as it becomes available, we automatically assign it for you. So now United is looking out for those customers rather than them having to scroll and keep refreshing and refreshing. And lastly, back to the inspiration point, traveling with families. This is something that I was personally inspired by. You go from traveling with a light rollerboard and a backpack to traveling with a stroller and a car seat and a diaper bag and trying to wrangle 2 kids. And you realize that you don't have the hands to go into the app, to click on the boarding pass, to check the flight status. You just don't have the capability anymore. And so we were really proud to be the first airline and pretty much the only airline still to this day that's doing live activities. First in iPad and iPhone, then on the Android platform, and most recently an Apple Watch. And what this does for these customers and most of our personas is it brings all the contextual, personalized, and relevant information on that specific phase of your journey right to the home screen. No clicks. Take a glance while you're chasing your 4-year-old down the concourse. And then if you need your boarding pass, any action on that live activity is 1 click to open your boarding pass. And that 1 click changes based on the context of your journey. So if it's boarding pass, if it's Wi-Fi, if it's checking in, those 1 clicks matter to these customers. So you put all that together, and we really think this is a pretty unmatchable experience. Now, it's not unmatchable because I'm so naive to think that you all couldn't go build these features. What I think makes it unmatchable is we're not done. We're still moving and innovating towards a future that's 1 quarter, 1 month, 1 week away, focused on those customer journeys and customer personas. And continuing at the speed that we have, we're really, really focused on how do we eliminate pain points? How do we eliminate problem areas? How do we make travel more efficient? And how do we make it an overall better experience for the full journey and those specific customer personas? But how do we know it's working? United's in an incredible position right now because we're growing. We're the largest airline in the world, and every year, just like this year, you're going to continue to see us announce new and exciting destinations. You never knew that you wanted to go to Greenland or Mongolia until our most recent announcement. Now people are talking about it. But with growth comes new dots on the map and new places that we can connect people to. And with that growth, we're still seeing month over month and year over year, our customer satisfaction of our customers using the app continue to grow. So it's giving us the proof point that we're doing the right thing from a feature standpoint. Also from a scale standpoint, I didn't talk a lot about technology, but the scale continues to get bigger, and the capabilities to support that scale has to grow with it. Just this past Sunday, which was the Sunday after Thanksgiving, we had the largest customer day in the history of the airline. We moved the equivalent of 11 reInvent attendees on 1 single day on that Sunday. And having the capability to do that at scale is something we just flat out didn't have before we moved to the cloud and the architecture that we've put as an underpinning to what I've talked about here. And then lastly, to be a the best airline, we've had to look at some metrics and see how that guides us. And so I'm sure, every group in this room is seeing the trends of the 2 charts on the left, which is the generation of customers that are flying on United now is changing. It's a generation that's a predominant digital native, grew up digital native generation. And as a result, they're engaging at an incredible level with us. They want features, they want more capabilities, and they want to interact. But also on top of that, over the last 5 years, we've seen our NPS grow, which is continuing to give us the data and the encouragement that what we're doing around that customer experience is making a difference. And that 28-point growth is for all customers. But if you drill into customers that just use the app, it looks more like 40 points higher over the last 5 years. If you drill deeper and look at customers that changed their flight when they had a delay or a cancel in the app, it grows to 50 or 60 points higher. And so the proof points of how we're enabling self-service, confidence, and personalization in those customer journeys is coming through in that NPS data. And it's something that we're really proud of, and it's continuing to motivate us because we're not even close to done. Now, lastly, this discussion is also about our partner ecosystem. And I'm really excited in just a second. Chris and Claire are going to join me on stage. And DXC and AWS have been incredible partners to United. And what we expect out of partners is we expect them to approach customer journeys and customer personas in the exact same way that we do. And these are two great partners that really exemplify thinking about the United customer as their own and being driven to create incredible experiences just like we do. So with that, I'll invite Chris and Claire to join, and we'll have a quick discussion.
Thank you. And remember, we're going to take some time for questions at the end, so we've got a mic and stuff to pass around. It's always interesting to hear because I'm sure all of you, most of us, not you, but most of us flew here. So you can all see yourselves in those journeys. And, as an airline geek, and, I have my United Premier tag hanging off my bag. And I always joke, it touches all of us. I used to, because of where I work, I'd be sitting in Newark Airport or something, and something would be delayed, and I'd be on the phone texting our team who works on United, being like, hey, what's going on here? And it's amazing because you don't have to do that anymore. Now the app tells me before it even happened. So that lucky experience that I used to have, now the whole world has because of partnership. So it's great, and I hope you can all see, how yourself, how this affects your own technology and your own life. So you kind of finished on partnership. For those of you who don't know the airline industry, I think it's harder to find an industry where that is more dependent on people who aren't you in order to deliver your product between air traffic control, governments, airports, the whole 9 yards. So maybe, Claire or Grant first, just a little bit about kind of how you see it working. And even beyond the three of us, we're all sitting here because we're partners. How do you think about engaging partners? What's a good one? What's a bad one?
Yeah, I'll start if that's okay. For us, I made a couple references to the pandemic, and maybe I'll put a comment on that and then talk about partnership. Through the course of the pandemic, we had a period of time where things weren't looking super great for airlines and people coming together to travel. And in that period of time, we really transformed inside the company to the point that now we talk about kind of a startup in the body of a 100-year-old company, because we just had to innovate because it was kind of what was at stake in the moment in time. And whether that was delivering features the next day after we talked about them, to opening borders and travel that really depended on hard deadlines, we got really, really nimble. And when you get really, really nimble and you have needs, it really illustrates what partners show up to support you. And I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways for me is, there was no SOW with DXC or AWS that said, hey, we're going to go 10 times as fast as we used to. There were no, changes to the overall, organizational structure. But when you have partners versus suppliers and vendors, you have people that look across the table at you and say, like, hey, we're doing this. And I think that's been a big opportunity. And obviously the pandemic kind of galvanized those relationships and showed where those partnerships were. But even to this day, we're still approaching it in the same way, which is setting really clear expectations around, hey, we're in this together and we're focused on the customer and we're focused on creating a better experience. And these are our expectations and how we generate that partnership. And I think those were some of the lessons we learned through kind of becoming a startup in the pandemic. And it's still been kind of a guidepost for us.
Who's there for you when you need them? From your perspective, coming at it from the other side, this massive, how do you think about partnerships as kind of the supplier of the services?
Yeah, sure. So to answer the question, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and some of my background. I think that might be relevant. Please. So Claire Ward, you can hear a British voice, and Chris smiles because, I do live in Las Vegas, about 30 minutes north of here. It's a cool place to live. I started life in the UK, and I've now been in the aviation industry 30 years. And you look back on that, it's a long time, it went quick. But one of the things that I did is I lived in the Middle East for a while, for 9 years. And in the Middle East, when you buy something, all they care about is price. And it's all this challenge about negotiating the lowest possible price. But you get to a point the price is so low that a partner can't provide the service. And one of the things that I've spent a long time doing, so as an airline CIO, was trying to educate procurement teams to, yes, price is important, but first of all, can they deliver on the job, which is proposition? And more importantly, where's the partnership? Because I don't just want a traditional supplier relationship. And what does that mean, though? What does partnership mean? And for partnerships to last a long term, you can think of any relationship in life. It's people who rock up when you need it most. It's people who have your back. It's people that are adding value to the topic of conversation, whether it be about putting the customer at the heart of a mobile app or how to make it secure or resilient. So when you start to think about partnership, and I actually baked lots of partnership questions into RFPs for that purpose, because it's something that I think has developed a lot in the last 10 years. And now AWS prides itself on having absolutely great partners. But Chris will tell you there's a huge vetting process to go through. Not anyone can rock up and be a partner. So what I see, coming back to United and DXC, is your partnerships works when they're there right by your side, helping out with that customer story, that customer journey, that customer vision, but also the things we didn't talk about, Grant hasn't yet talked about all the underlying infrastructure. Mobile apps in the travel world cannot go down. You have to be completely 24/7, resilient, secure. Yeah, you just have to be there now. It's what everybody expects. If you're not there, people are like, where are you? Something's gone wrong. So it's all the ability to provide that extra added value of designing that architecture that really is resilient and secure.
Yeah. You know, it's funny, one of the things we talk about to kind of that resiliency piece, and I think because you guys are so good at it, you took it for granted, but one of the things we talk about at DXC a lot is we support a ton of different customers, and every customer is always the most important in the room, right? And one of the things we talk about is our manufacturing customers, where we scream and yell, and we have a shared G background. I came from manufacturing, and you're really, pissed off if something doesn't work, and you're really screaming at it. And I say that is nothing until you visited the command center or our joint command centers where we're running. The time before someone starts screaming is measured in seconds, not minutes. If these apps go down, if you can't check in at a kiosk, or if your mobile isn't working suddenly, and the time until you're reading about it on CNN is measured in minutes, not hours and days. And that's just a level of resiliency, uptime, and operational things that I don't think everyone appreciates. So kind of building on that, despite what the show floor would make you think, we are not at the Gen AI conference. We are at the Amazon Cloud conference. So, Grant, for you, kind of the obligatory cloud question. I think looking at the age in this room, some people might know what TPF is. Many of you probably don't. It predates all of us, I'll tell you that. Mainframes, airlines have some real mix of technology.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit about how, could you have done what you did without cloud, and how do you think about it for the next step, the next phase of the journey?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, Chris's team, spends a lot of time supporting us from everything from the latest and greatest cloud native app all the way to, TPF mainframes that are 57, 58 years old. And, for us, I guess the first answer comes in the context of what we just experienced in Thanksgiving. We have the equivalent of 30 to 40 Black Friday sales a year. It's a Sunday after Thanksgiving. It's an unexpected snowstorm at 2 of our hubs concurrently on a Friday night. And so we always had to scale for the biggest demand, because it wasn't like a let's add some compute before Black Friday scenario, because we never knew when it was coming. It was a random Black Friday, 30 or 40 times a year. And so what the cloud has enabled for us is obviously getting to that dynamic scale, but it really just pushes the problem somewhere else. And so, as we've gone through the modernization journey, you of course start with your high volume channels, your new applications, then you quickly land in your eventing architecture and infrastructure and messaging. Because I live in an ecosystem where I'm not just dealing with my mainframe, I'm dealing with hundreds of mainframes around the world at airports and other airlines. And so messaging is pretty key in that demand. And then lastly, we're modernizing the mainframe. And we're one of the few airlines in the world, Claire will tell you, that run our own passenger service system. And the reason we do that is because we think we can differentiate the experience for customers. We don't want just a big box passenger service system that's going to create a vanilla experience for our customers. We want to differentiate. And so modernization is a better path than replacement. And the nice thing is the learnings we had on the cloud in the customer channels are now informing that modernization. We cut our teeth, so to speak. And as we're doing the modernization of our passenger service system, we've got the 4 or 5 years now of learnings on what worked, what didn't work, where we needed to apply more architecture, where we needed to apply more scale. And we're doing that really methodically right now in partnership with your team as well.
Yeah. Claire, shifting gears, I think, Grant just talked a lot about kind of technically how you build resiliency and how do you've run airline, you've been a CIO for an airline, you've operated in the Middle East. How do you think about organizational resiliency? Like how do you build the team to be able to deal with those 30 Black Friday events, and how does that matter, and how much?
Yeah, so it's a super good question. First of all, let's define, you need resiliency because of disruption. The first question is, what is disruption in the airline world? And let's just sort of get everybody on the same page with that, because most people think of disruption like the examples that Grant gave, like a big snowstorm or a major event. Actually, in the airline world, there is no single day for most airlines where everything goes to plan. No single day where everything goes to plan. But what do I mean by that? So just think of yourself in the airport environment. A flight comes in 5 minutes late, and the turnaround time is scheduled to be quite tight, so perhaps it leaves 5 minutes late. Already you have disruption. And it could be anything from that 5 minutes late to 15 minutes late to a couple of hours late to at a peak time where you need all staff on the gates, you've got 2 that have gone sick, and 1 gate can't be operated to maximum capacity. It's very small things that cause this disruption. But why it's so important is you get a big knock-on effect. If a flight leaves late, and there's no contingency, it arrives late, and it just keeps going late the whole day. And so it's how you manage disruption. So understanding that concept is data is very important. I'm going to tell a little story that sort of highlights it. So in the years I was working in Dubai, we're going back to 2017 now, so we are going back a fair time. The concept of real-time data-driven outcomes and modern data architecture was extremely new. It didn't really exist that much at that time. Now, the interesting thing about Dubai is if you draw a circle around it, a flying time of about 3.5 hours, you get about 90% of flights outside of that circle. So just to give you sort of a picture of the geo, to the north you've got Kuwait, to the sort of northwest you've got Saudi and Jeddah's outside that circle. You've got Africa to the southwest, and then the south is Seychelles, east is Maldives, Sri Lanka, and India. All 3.5 hours out. So 3.5 hours ahead of time, I know flight's going to be late. It's not even predictive analytics, it's real data. And so you start to think about, okay, well, if that flight's now going to be 10 minutes late, what's the next best action that I should take to re-normalize my operation when it does arrive? And how do I do that for multiple flights to the scale of United, which is extremely complicated? And sometimes those actions aren't complicated. I will have somebody at the gate to walk the really critical passengers to their departing flights, their connecting flights. I'll get someone down on the ramp to make sure the bags get there as well. I'll make sure there's data in the app to tell the passenger what's going to happen to them so they're not worried. I will hold a departing flight just for 10 minutes because it can make it up en route and the connecting passengers will make it. Sometimes it's very minor, which is something actually that Grant talked about and they do a lot. Sometimes it's these very minor adjustments that actually allow you to bring those disruptions back to operational regularity. But in those days, I go back to 2017, the concept of all that real-time data in one place, doing event-driven outcomes with AI, ML, and GenAI tools just didn't exist. And that's the art of the possible today. So what I would say about operational disruption is it doesn't matter if a whole runway's out. It doesn't matter if it's the big snowstorm. It doesn't matter if a flight's 10 minutes late and it's a tiny disruption. Scenario planning is critical. Because if you've got that data and you've got all the toolkit to analyze it and understand what to do and what the next best action is, then you're in a really good place to try to manage it as best possible. And in the airline world, it's not a perfect world. Disruption happens every single day.
That's awesome. Grant, just thinking a little bit, we talked a lot about speed, kind of a 2-part question here. You talked a lot about speed and going fast. Just to reiterate, I think it's been a theme already, but I don't know that everybody in the audience appreciates just the complexity that you deal with outside of United's walls, right? So think however many dozens of countries you operate in, their air traffic control systems, you could imagine some are probably the most modern thing on the planet, and some are, and the guy handing over the card, fuel providers. So you've got this incredibly complex ecosystem that you're trying to move fast in. So kind of the first part of the question is, how do you figure out how to move so fast in that environment? And then the second part is, you talked a lot about asking your customers what's next. What are your other secrets? Like, how do you, once you know how to move fast, what are your kind of United secrets on figuring out that what we want in that app before we want it? And
Yeah.
how do you make it happen?
I mean, I don't feel like I can answer that second question, can I?
It's a secret.
I would say, in the first question, how do we move fast in a complex partner ecosystem? I think there's two paths. You can either say, hey, it's going to be this way, and you can pound your chest. Or you can meet those partners kind of where they want to be met. And that's been our approach, is whether it's interfacing with airport systems that are equally 50 years old, whether it's adopting new standards with IATA and some of the governing boards. We've tried to architect a lot of flexibility to say, hey, you tell us how you want to be interfaced with, on what frequency and what format, and we'll meet you there. And we'll have it with the same level of enterprise support that we have any capability. But that way we're not the least common denominator. I think a lot of airlines—
Do you find they welcome that conversation, or you have to suck them in?
Usually it's a proof not promises approach. Like, you've got to do it rather than say, let's try it. Or rather than say, this is what the way it's going to be. But I think once we've had those examples, we've gotten to good places. On your second question, so where does the secret sauce come from? One of the things that I have found is every time I guess what customers want, I'm wrong. And in fact, we've got like a little inside joke where we have a test and learn team, and they do A/B testing over and over again. We're running 200 or 300 variants of A/B tests across our digital channels every day. And they'll put up two examples, and they'll say, which one scored better? And no matter what it is, I always pick the one that scored less. And so I think, the big secret, and it's probably super obvious to this group, is don't guess, test. Go out and actually put it in front of customers. Put it, 1% of your traffic against it. Something our size, 1% is a couple 100,000 transactions, and you get some really strong data feeds. And then you can quickly pull it back. And for the tests that don't go so well, nobody notices. The volume is such that you can handle it. But don't guess and test is really the big takeaway. And we've then been able to really double down we're in Vegas, we're doubling down on the things that prove to be winners.
It makes a lot of sense, data. I think, Claire, you said, these guys are kind of the A game, right? They're playing at a different league than everybody else in terms of scale and size and expertise. From where you sit looking after airlines for AWS, you see, players who don't necessarily have that level yet. How do you think that, someone who doesn't have as good as they are, hints, tips, how do you think they should think about how they move faster and operationalize things quicker if you don't have the scale and expertise that they,
Three partners.
Yeah.
It's different. It's not, there's no one size fits all, I think is the answer. In terms of how do you innovate at scale and how do you create that pace, I think first thing is customer obsession. Put the customer at the heart of everything that you do and start with the customer and work backwards because, as we said, customer demands are ever increasing. And okay, let's tell a story because stories are always the things that bring this to life. So 2 weeks ago, I'm in Europe. I'm on my way between the UK and Palma de Mallorca. I have to go via Madrid, going to a big customer meeting. And there's horrible weather in Europe. My flight out of London is delayed. And now my window of connection is going like this. And I'm sitting there going, I have to make this. I really have to get there tonight. And I'm out a week, so I've got a bag. And usually I check the bag in. What a silly thing to do. So I get to Madrid, and I'm suddenly like, I have got no time to get to the gate. I'm looking on the mobile app, and it doesn't give me the gate. And luckily, they announce it on the flight, so I do have that information. I'm running through the airport, and the signage runs out, and I'm standing there going, where do I go? And eventually, I turn up at the gate, and I get there. And as I sit down, I'm like, I made it. I bet my bag won't. And guess what? I was in the same clothes the next day for the customer event. But why the story? It goes, customer expectations and how do we think about these things? The whole of that time, I was on the app. I was sitting there going, where's the gate? Where's my bag? How do I talk to people? How do I report it missing? How can I communicate with them to say, look, I knew there's 2 flights after me, They were probably full, so I might not have made it if I'd have missed the flight, but my bag should be on one of them. How can I communicate with them to say, please get it to the hotel tonight? Zero opportunity for this particular airline. There was nothing in the app that was useful at all whatsoever on this occasion. So I will not name the airline because that wouldn't be very fair. But I know, because I've been traveling with United, that United have that capability. So I think it's all about putting yourselves in the shoes of the customer and hearing about those stories. It's hearing about the situations that didn't go to plan, which gives you the ideas of how to solve the problems.
Absolutely, absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit, one of the things at DXC that we focus on a lot is, we kind of call it operational confidence, right? Because we need to make things run to the point the app is amazing, everything's amazing as long as it works. And you talk about mainframes that are older than any of us, things like that. And I'm sure many in the room, you work for companies that have budgets. You work for companies that have pressure. You have your boss looking down at you, and that's always an interesting conversation. So I'm curious how you guys at United think about that with the boss, because most boardrooms aren't going to understand that you need to do a core networking upgrade because the switch has gone out of date, and absolutely no one is going to notice a single thing different when you're done, and it's going to cost a lot of money and time. But they absolutely will notice that the feature on the app is going to be a little bit late. So just your thoughts on how you and maybe advice for anyone in the room, because you've obviously done it very successfully, on how you balance that conversation with board members and maybe folks who aren't as steeped in the technology.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, I have a couple advantages in the sense that the industry that we work. At United, we have something we call the Core 4. And it's like a framework of how we make decisions. We actually roll it out to our front line. And the Core 4 is safe, caring, dependable, and efficient. And so that even applies to when we think about technology obsolescence. There's a safety component to technology obsolescence. There's a dependability component to technology obsolescence. And I think it's no more apparent than in the airlines where, to your point, if some of our operational systems are down for 5, 10, 15 minutes, a CNN truck is rolling up to O'Hare or Houston or LA to have the live on-site feature of United having technology challenges. And so as a result, the priority is incredibly high for those things. And I think making the business case around what happens if you lose a flight and the millions of revenue associated to that 15-minute outage, generates a priority for us to make the right decisions on this. But it also generates a few ways that we start thinking differently, which is what happens when things fail. I used to work in environments where there was planned downtime, and you were like, hey, when it fails, we'll just wait for the planned downtime and we'll fix it. And I literally don't have planned downtime on any of my 100 applications. Like we assume that we're going active on every release. And so you start to think differently in terms of what happens when something fails. What are the pressure relief valves that we can turn to keep the airline operation running, keep the customer experience running, but maybe take some load off the system, or maybe turn off a non-functional experience. Maybe the response time goes up by a second, but the app's still functional. And so I think the tabletop exercise, I think Claire talked about scenario planning. We do a lot of tabletop exercises that don't just talk about, hey, we're going to fail over from this AZ to this AZ or this region to that region. It's more finite than that. We're going to turn off, the bag message queue to our partner because we know that that bag's not going to arrive for 5 hours. We got 5 hours to get the message there. And those kind of things help us really determine what's mission one, critical one, versus things that we can do and knobs that we can pull to keep customers from feeling an adverse effect. So a little bit on the priority and then also on how we try to keep that impact from happening.
Yeah, you subtly hit on something there that I see. We see customers who balance this very successfully, and we see customers who really struggle with it. And you hit on something very subtle there, which is the tech people making the impact of the investment that they're questioning making real, right? So going to the consumer goods company and saying, hey, do you realize if this box breaks, that factory line stops? If this happens, then this customer, because I think a lot of us as technologists take it for granted, right? We know these systems are critical, we know how they run, we know if the switch breaks, if the mainframe goes down, if the AZ is not available, X, Y, and Z will happen. It's almost like gravity. And I'll tell you, from our more successful customers who do what you just described, they do exactly what you just described, which is they make it clear what the impact is. And I think it makes that financial decision making a lot easier. So Claire, shifting to you, same question, but kind of a different perspective. Instead of kind of features, how do you get people to understand the balance between resiliency and security? And I think where you all sit at AWS, I mean, probably not allowed to say this out loud, but by definition, one of the world's largest targets, right? So how do you all think about it, right?
Security. Well, security is just make people smile because it's really topical. You're all here in Las Vegas, and what some of you may know is just over a year ago were a couple of the biggest ransomware attacks ever onto big casinos here in Las Vegas. And what I found out, and this is hearsay, I have no evidence of this, but I've had friends working in hotels here, and they said it wasn't just ransomware attacks. That's what we heard about in the press. Other hotels had denial of service attacks. So it was a big occasion, but security incidents will always happen. Bad actors will always be there. As technology evolves, it creates, let's bring Gen AI back into the conversation because we haven't talked about it. Many people in the room will say, well, we have some nervousness about Gen AI because of the new risks it might bring. And we want to actually really test it very thoroughly to understand what it will do and what it won't do so that we don't open new doors to bad actors. It's a fair comment. So you can't prevent security risk in the context of new technology evolves and it creates new opportunities for bad actors. But let's go back to the world of technology and delivering on technology. How many people in this room would hold their hand up like me and say, at some point in their life, they've been involved in a technology project where it was close to the end of delivery, and then everybody said, we better go and ask security. And suddenly everything came to a grinding halt because security said, please do X, Y, and Z remediations. Yeah, because security was an afterthought. And I think what we're all trying to change, and the world of the cloud is trying to change, is security is your friend. If you bake security planning in right at the beginning, there's at the 100,000-foot level, there's two things you want to do. One is prevent bad actors actually being successful, so it's perimeter security. And the other is, look, it might happen, but how do you identify it very quickly and stop them getting anything? So they can't, for example, mask all of your PII data so that they can't actually steal any data. Your ransomware is a slightly different issue. But security, very complicated to do in detail, but at the 100,000-foot level, the objectives are clear. But if you bake it right in at the beginning in your programs and into the architecture, it doesn't stop innovation. Yeah, I'm sure Grant will say, well, we do security, but will we put releases live every couple of weeks? That's what companies do now with mobile apps. But security is just baked in end to end, start to finish. And I think that's my key message of how to try to get the balance.
Yeah, that's the future. I always find if you have the job I do, it's kind of interesting. You get to see a bunch of amazing different industries. And the thing, whenever I speak to people who aren't part of our industry, meaning tech, is they're floored at just the sheer volume of security incidents that happen. I don't think, when you start talking about, across our state, we see millions of events, by the hour. I think that the average layman just doesn't have an appreciation, and the buzzword of Gen AI is actually going to really even affect security. So actually building on that, Claire, before one more question, and then we'll go to the room for questions, but kind of coming off that, and I'll caveat that you're not allowed to say Gen AI is the answer, but you can say how Gen AI is going to affect it. What do you see from a trends point of view in the industry? What do you think, what's coming next?
Well, from a technology point of view, rather than a customer point of view, let's look at tech. We'll do a bit of both.
We'll start with tech.
So from a customer point of view, first thing is probably changes in booking patterns. So if you, as Grant was saying, look, if you're a business traveler, you know what you want. You're coming to Vegas, you want 3 nights here or 4 nights here, you're going back home. It's really simple. But what happens when you mix that with a partner's coming with you, or a wife or a girlfriend, or someone's coming with you, or kids, and you're going to mix your business and your leisure? And most of us had corporate booking systems, and trying to orchestrate the leisure piece on those is completely impossible. So nobody in the journey knows that you're actually together because it's 2 completely separate bookings. You've then got the issues about overcrowding. So you probably heard about Venice trying to charge fees, Barcelona limiting Airbnb availability, June up in Alaska saying we're not going to let more cruise ships in the next Y and Z on certain days to limit traffic. And most people don't want to be part of those hugely populated, overcrowded places. So now you're going to search for, I'd like to go to Venice, please, or I'd like to go to somewhere that looks and feels like Venice in Europe but isn't Venice and is less quiet. That's a completely different type of search. So the whole content availability, how you offer something, how people are searching for vacations and destinations is completely different. And then there's the sort of like the technology expectations. So just going to give you a couple of stats to put things into perspective. There's a recent survey by the industry association, IATA, and they were looking at the search and book process. And the stat says that only 16% of people actually want to have any human interaction now in that process. And it's even very regionalized. There's a lot of Middle East and Africa, actually. Yeah, we just want it to be all digital. So our expectations are changing. But another stat, so a Skift digital transformation report this year, it surveys executives just like yourselves of travel and hospitality companies. And only 35% said we feel that our organization delivers customer service and customer experience in an excellent way. Only 35%. So we all want digital, but we don't deliver it yet, is the message. So when you think about trends, what's actually going on, if you look at other stats in those similar types of surveys, is exactly what Grant talked about today. It's all about customer experience. It's also all about personalization. And that would be another whole hour's topic, so we won't go there, but there's an awful lot of people that talk about personalization, personalize at what I call a persona level, not at an individual level. It's very hard to do. If you want to learn more, come and chat afterwards. But we're seeing an awful lot of investment into understanding true customer 360, true personalization, and true customer engagement in that context. And that's what I would say is at the priority, or one of the top priorities for most travel and hospitality companies at the moment.
Same question, Greg. What's next for United without saying anything that's going to tip American off?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick up where Claire left off there. What we're seeing is people value experiences. And the experience is now the value driver and not the price. And as an industry, you're starting to see the differentiation of carriers is, creating a kind of winners and losers environment. And why that matters for me as a digital guy is never more has digital been the kind of core part of that experience. I joined the airline industry 10 years ago, and the simple fact that I never appreciated is the reason that air travel is so anxiety-inducing is because you desperately want to get to where you're going. You're either going on a business trip, you've got to have the meeting that you're going to close the deal on, you're going on a vacation you've been budgeting for 2 years, or you're going home because you're exhausted after one of those things. And the more that digital can personalize and facilitate a totally different experience on United than it can anyone else, then you're gonna choose United more so, and that's why we're making really big customer investments. You saw us invest in Starlink and in-flight Wi-Fi, and we'll be rolling that out on our fleet starting next year. And you don't do those kind of things if customers don't appreciate experience and differentiation. But the ability that we'll have to continue to drive like a truly transformational onboard experience with really fast onboard Wi-Fi is just one example where that differentiation is going to produce, hopefully, more loyal customers to United.
I absolutely can't wait for the Wi-Fi, and please take this as my personal appeal to make sure you block VoIP. Because the last thing I want is the person in that seat next to me deciding that it's a good time to strike up a phone call.
I understand. I understand.
Let's
Something we're actively
stream,
working on.
but not have them chatty. Well, thank you both so much. I appreciate you joining us, and thank you to the audience for taking an hour out of your day and spending it with us. It's nothing short of amazing and impressive what you all have built there, and I look forward to flying you more often, and someone here is going to be flying you home tomorrow, so we'll go from there.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate
Have a great day.